Peace to you all and welcome to this video. Today I wanted to tackle one of the famous critiques that Richard Dawkins proposed against intelligent design. In order to make a more, let's say, coherent reasoning, I will follow a bit my notes and then I'll make it as engaging in the case as possible. And I hope you find it beneficial, useful, and let me know then after this in the comments what you think about it. So let's just jump straight onto it. So the critique in question is the famous critique of who designed the designer, which is found in the God Delusion. And the renowned Richard Dawkins presents one of the critiques to the intelligent design theory for the origin of life. And this critique has become a well-known trope in the atheism versus deism and theism debates. Who designed the designer? What does Dawkins actually say? He says, design is not the only alternative to chance. Natural selection is a better alternative. Indeed, design is not a real alternative at all, because it raises an even bigger problem that it solves. Who designed the designer? Chance and design both fail as solutions to the problem of statistical improbability because one of them is the problem and the other one regresses to it. Natural selection is a real solution, he says. It is the only solution. Sorry, he says it is the only workable solution that has ever been suggested. And it is not only a workable solution, it is a solution of stunning elegance and power. Well, Dawkins, of course, has rhetorical skills. You have to grant this to him at the very least. But their problem with rhetoric is, of course, that it often hides sophistry, whereby nice words hide fallacious thinking that do not stand the test of critical thinking. Extrapolated from all the flowery words, Dawkins' argument, if we can even define it as such, boils down to the ability to ask about the cause of a cause as an invalidating factor for the causal explanation itself. So the mere fact that we can ask about the cause of something which we consider as a cause in turn, that would be considered as an invalidating factor for the first cause to be an explanation, basically. But let's just go to it slowly. Or not too slowly, I don't want this video to be too long, but let's just go to it. Of course, intuitively, this already actually sounds superficial and fallacious if you think about it. I mean, you would wonder, how could Professor Dawkins, an evolutionary biologist, professor for public understanding of science in the University of Oxford from 1995 to 2008, be wrong? Surely we misunderstood this point, right? Well, that is not actually the case. And this is why this book and this argument specifically received a lot of critiques from philosophers, academics, and thinkers in general. Dawkins claims that invoking a designer in turn, so to invoke a designer, evokes or leads to an infinite regress if we call upon a designer. Because if life is so complex as to require a designer, surely the designer must be even more complex and even more in need of an explanation and in turn of another designer. There are a number of reasons why this is false, and it hides a very fallacious type of thinking as well as a hidden agenda, as we will see. First of all, it is a fallacy. So this goes back to the point where we went, where we said, okay, let's dig about it a bit more. It is a fallacy and false to claim that a causal explanation for a phenomenon is negated because the proposed explanation in turn needs another explanation. We often see sciences proposing explanation for phenomena and inferring past causes based on the available data. All sorts of sciences do this. But do we ever see historical sciences, for instance, or any other science denying an explanation as a cause because the full account of that cause is not fully explained? No. And the reason is obvious. An explanation of one event is not negated by the fact that it does not explain all the events in the causal chain leading up to it. Let's make an example, just to unpack it. Imagine we were to discover some technology on the moon. And we observe it. It's very strange, very weird, but it is technology. We recognize it as such. It has maybe symbols. It has some sort of, it has symbols and so on. So something which we attribute to mind. But then the Dawkins of the story comes and says, well, let's not jump to um, to this conclusion to appeal to intelligent design, because we don't know who this designer of this technology is. And then, even if it was aliens, who alienated the aliens? This is something that he would say. I mean, he will not say it because this is nonsense, of course, but this is the same type of reasoning that he applied for origins of life, for the analysis of origin of life. Again, suppose that a group of archaeologists go to a cave, they discover some very, very ancient painting, and as, for example, Stephen Myers proposed, imagine that they do some carbon dating or some timeline analysis, and they understood for a fact that this is way back, way before our estimated timeline of the beginning of actually human life and humanity on planet Earth. And then when the people who discovered this painting propose it to the wider audiences, to the public, to other academics, the Dawkins of the story says, well, we don't know about these humans. We don't know that there was any of the human back then. And then it goes again with the fallacy. We know that humans were not there because of other explanation. Then who, if you appeal to intelligent design for these paintings, who painted the painters? I mean, it's fallacious just by hearing it, and this is just stupid, wrong examples in a way. I mean, analogies have always limits, as David Hume said, but these are just examples to let us get a bit closer to the fallacy which is behind Dawkins's reasoning. This is one. Okay, so let's just end with it. It is a fallacy to claim. Sorry, the summary is actually this one. An explanation of an event is not negated by the fact that so the explanation, does not explain all the events in the causal chain leading up to it. So if I have a good explanation for something, I don't have to explain in full the explanation of the thing I want to explain. Number two, for Dawkins, this is an issue. The whole origin of life and appealing to intelligent design is an issue only if non-materialistic causes are invoked when explaining the origins of life. So no issues at all are to be raised if a materialistic explanation is invoked. Materialistic, but why? Couldn't we ask the same fallacious question as the one proposed by Dawkins? But for the material explanation instead, I mean, if Dawkins appeals to natural selection, we could simply say, well, what selected the selector? And this is a very short point, but it's very connected to the third point, which is the last one. The third point, which is strictly related to the previous one, to the second point, is that, as you might already have thought, Dawkins clearly presupposes the metaphysical validity of materialism. He claims that because the type of functional complexity that we see in life would need the explanation of a mind, which is actually irrational. I mean, it's reasonable, okay? But it's not reasonable for him because if a mind has the same or more type of complexity as the one that we see in life, then stopping at a mind as the ultimate explanation would mean to break the reasoning that led us to infer a mind in the first case. Allegedly, according to him, falling into the fallacy of, for example, special pleading, falling in the fallacy of special pleading. So let's just dive into this a bit more and let's repeat it so that it's clear. Dawkins claims that because we appeal to, we say that, okay, life is very complex, it has some features that can only be produced by mind, therefore a mind must have produced life. But then Dawkins says, okay, then who designed that mind? Because that mind has the same features that you see in, for example, in life, in biology. And he says, if you keep doing that, you have an infinite regress of minds. And he presupposes that you cannot stop at a mind as the ultimate explanation. You need to stop at the material, at the foundation. That's the issue. So what is the issue with that? The problem here is that we know for a fact that there ought to be an ultimate reality. There must be an ultimate reality. But why? We differ as to whether this ultimate reality is material or not, but it has to exist in order for everything to be in the first place. Suffice to say that we experience the status of being, of existence, and because non-existence or non-being, by definition, has no causal powers and is literally nothing, non-being, then being, the status of existence, is necessary, and the question is then to know what is this ultimate existence or ultimate reality. Some argue that it's God, other that it's the material cosmos itself, the material cosmos. Others said it's the reality of abstractions, sort of a Platonic world of ideas, rather than the material. And this means that we have to stop. We have to stop. And justifiably so. And where do we have to stop? We have to stop at an ultimate reality. Now, the intelligent design argument does not necessarily argue that the designer is God. There are arguments, then there are philosophical, they build upon the repercussions of this. But the designer could be, for example, you could claim that it's a super advanced aliens that create life. Or you could say that it's God, of course, of the maker of the universe and so on. But if, as Dawkins does, you claim that you ought to explain the whole causal chain, and if we know that we have to stop at an ultimate reality, for the reason that we just did, then we clearly see that Dawkins unjustifiably presupposes the philosophical and metaphysical validity of materialism. He simply and nonchalantly assumes that material mechanisms are the foundation, and he presupposes that mind cannot occupy that space. Dawkins literally brings in his religion in the most dogmatic, I would say also bigoted and superficial way, and arrogantly, rhetorically also scoffs at the other party's position, which is an argued position. It's not like Dawkins would just say materialism is just true. I don't even say it explicitly. I just assume it, right? But then the other position actually does an argument, and that argument is denied because of this Dawkins' religious adherence to materialism and atheism. He also nonchalantly applies a fallacious reasoning to delegitimate the intelligent design position while applying double and triple standard to his own position, presuming it as true. And finally, at least one of the major fallacies of Dawkins' critique is sort of special pleading. He says that material causes can be used as explanation for the origins of life without having to fully explain the whole presupposed and unproven metaphysical materialistic infrastructure, but mind cannot be, because mind in this specific context requires such an explanation, such a full explanation. In the context where minds are invoked as explanation, for example in archaeology, when we discover, for example, ancient relics, that is okay. We can appeal to mind. Why? Only because, according to Dawkins' reasoning, only because we presuppose that ultimately those minds are based on material processes. And that, of course, is far from the truth, even far from basic coherence. And for that, we are more than justified not to ask who designed the designer, but rather we can say who Dawkinsed the Dawkins. I hope this was useful. I tried to use my notes to make this reasoning as coherent and as structured as possible. And please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you ever came across this reasoning while during your studies, and feel free to go back to the video, maybe slow it down and look through it, or re-listen some of the parts if they are a bit complex. And as I said, share your comments, and I'll make sure to answer them as well. One reference which is quite interesting, I will actually end with a reference book, which is what I'm finishing now, is the Signature in the Cell by Stephen Meyer. And this part, this analysis, you gotta give it to him. You can find it in one of the chapters, basically in this book. One of the critiques that he counters is this critique by Dawkins, which you can find in page 388. You can see here who designed the designer, and the chapter is, but does it explain? So it's referring to intelligent design, wondering whether it actually has a good explanatory power, and this is one of the critiques that he counters. Stephen Myers expounds more on this. There are also, of course, also others that answered to this sort of argument. which was very much, you could say, debunked. And I hope this is just useful to you so that you have sort of a gist of what this alleged argument by Dawkins is about and answers. So just to summarize, and I will end with this, we have first, it is a fallacy to claim that you need to explain the explanation if the explanation is already good enough to explain the phenomena. Okay, maybe you will want to look about that explanation, but the fact that you cannot fully explain it does not mean that it's not an explanation for what you are trying to explain. Secondly, Dawkins has this double standard whereby materialistic causes are considered as a good explanation, either to stop and not to have to go through the whole metaphysical chain of explanation, or even just presupposing that it is true as an ultimate reality, where this is not done for example, non-materialistic explanation. So it's a double standard. And then he presupposes materialism and he sneaks materialism from the back door, in a very non-honest way, I have to say. So this is all. I wish you peace again and hope to see you soon.